Middle powermanship and middle power is all about strategy. It was timely perfect for Kazakhstan to identify itself as a middle power.
How can a person be friends with everybody but still pursue its own interests?
We always had the natural ability to balance.
Let's drop politics.
Hi everyone, this is the first episode of the Astana Times Unplugged, our new podcast series where we break down complicated things into simpler terms. I'm your host Asil, and this is my colleague Aybarshin.
Here, two curious journalists will talk about politics, social life, economics, basically major terms in a relatable conversations. With the help of a special guest each episode, we want to ask questions of how global and local events impact our lives.
And tonight we want to dive into the topic of geopolitics, particularly the role of Kazakhstan on the global stage. Think multi-vector foreign policy, middle powers, or the effectiveness of the international system. We're gonna uncover this all tonight.
We are joined by Miras Zhienbayev. Miras, welcome to our first podcast. I personally know you from the presentation of your book, Widening the Scope, which is here on the table. And we will talk about the book a bit later. But I want to start our conversation by knowing more about your background. Have you ever known that you'll be an author of the book, or that you're going to be an expert in international politics, or that you're going to be a researcher? Please tell us more about your story.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's for me, it's a great honor and pleasure to be the first guest of your podcast, and I wish best of luck with this format.
Thank you.
Going back to the question, I think nobody can predict their own life, especially when you are young or just a schoolboy. I remember my grandmother, who always talks about there is only one education in the world exists, is economic, and no nanny. So I did my bachelor in economics actually, while my mom, I think when I was 12 or something like that, told me that maybe for international relations will be best choice for me. So I moved to the field of international relations during my third and fourth year of undergrad. Then I did my master's. I worked at High School of Economics in Moscow. Then I served at Kazakhstan Institute for Strategic Studies under the president within the European and American Studies departments. And now I'm head of Foreign Policy International Studies program at Maqsut Narikbayev University's MIND, which is actually Maqsut Narikbayev Institute for Networking and Development. First of its kind. It's actually the very first try for Kazakhstan to have a university-based think tank. So I'm very ambitious to develop my own program with a strong support with of the university.
It's very interesting when you mentioned that about your grandmother, for whom only economics existed. I have very similar parents. I think maybe they are from the same generation, because I'm also an economist in my bachelor. And here, Asil, my colleague, she's an
International
IR.
Relations
Yes,
bachelor.
so
Ended up in journalism field somehow.
Yeah, so interesting how we are all sitting in the same room now.
Since you mentioned the international relations, and for me as a person with a background in international relations, I would like to start tonight's conversation with the topic of middle powers. And as a journalist, I've heard and seen a lot of discussions last year and well ahead about the middle powers, but particularly in the context regarding the role of Kazakhstan. But before we dive into the role of Kazakhstan, can I ask you just one question? What is middle power in its essence? What's the practical meaning? Or if I may put it this way, like if you were to explain this concept to a person who's totally unfamiliar with geopolitics or international relations, how would you do it?
Theory of international relations as a discipline is and you know it better than me, is over-focused on great power competition. So even all of the theoretical concepts are always all about great powers. And we need to categorize all of the states in the world exist to some categories like great powers, middle powers, and small powers. Somehow we have, for example, regional powers, extra-regional powers. So too many concepts. That's why I think for wider audience it's not a clear term, especially when middle powermanship all of a sudden became maybe the most productive skinship of our foreign policy in recent years. As for me, middle powermanship and middle power is all about strategy. So it's not about size of territory. It's not about population, GDP, or something like that. It's all about unique ability of that states to be committed to international norms, to act. Well, if I say to act in the middle, it will be a bit profanation, but anyway, to have constructive agenda on international arena, to cooperate with each other to strengthen their own voices in international arena. And of course, it's all about the strategy itself. So they are not confronting with anyone in the world.
Strategy, you mean foreign policy strategy, right?
Yes.
And you put this definition as if it's a kind of your opinion, your theory, maybe based on the book. So does it mean there are other definitions or characteristics of the middle power? Is there a consensus among the scholars, at least?
Well, this concept is under 80 years because even our current world order is under 80, so it's going to be 80 this year. Many people in the world think that we always had international institutions, we always had international law, but it's all under 1 century old. In terms of middle powers, this concept, which was born maybe 70 or 75 years ago, the whole definition has changed because of the major shift in the world politics, but the middle power is still exists. So whole meaning of the term has changed, but the definition still exists. At the same time, what we can see to the moment is actually very changing landscape of international cooperations. Because if we see to the broader picture, we have some forms of power, we have many illusions regarding great power competitions. And why we need middle powers is to show that there is no any great power. If you remember, we had a superpower term in international relations theory, but after the collapse of Soviet Union, it was erosion of power. So there is no any country in the world in the position of hegemon or superpower who can just bring the order of their wish, of their only wish. So they need to cooperate, to collaborate with some amount of countries with the middle powers. Because without constructive attending of middle powers, you cannot be effective in the world to the moment. For example, even with SDG and global climate change, you will not increase the carbon emissions without constructive work with India, as example. In terms of forests, you will not succeed without constructive work with Brazil. So, in so many cases in different fields.
So basically you're saying the world has transformed from this like a bipolar model into more multipolar and also driven by things like climate change and probably economic state of certain regions, right?
Many different shifts in the world. Of course, after middle powers great comeback to the world scene. I remember the time when I was working on the book, because you always need to use a literature to write something, and all of the existed literature was like 5, 7, 10 years old to that moment. Nobody was interested in middle powers. In terms of academic debates, it was even whole debates that maybe it's the end of era of middle powers and we don't need to use that term anymore. But all of a sudden, when I finished the draft of the book, we had a whole issue of foreign policy on middle powers, some articles in foreign affairs. So most of great thinkers in international relations all of a sudden decided to contribute to that field. It was timely perfect for Kazakhstan to identify itself as a middle power, as we always was, because we always acted as a middle power, we always was middle power. But this natural shift in our core understanding as a nation, as a country, that we are middle power, gave us enough strength in terms of resilience as a country, as a foreign policy model, to stay still multivectoral, where non-alignment is a strategic choice. There is to not ally is okay. So it's our own way, it's our own term, and many of our colleagues, especially within the country, started to think about criteria. Yes, what does it mean to be middle power, and it's actually how all of the drama started, because many of our colleagues decided to let's call it rewrite academic history of middle powermanship to provide their own criteria or something like that. All of a sudden, most of them became as huge specialists in middle power politics and contributed to the field with their opinions. But it's still very important debates within the country, because in terms of overall development of our community, of our thinkers, academic scholars, and colleagues in foreign policy planning, it's very important for us to work on theory too.
So can I just clarify one thing about theory? We have middle powers, like again in the middle, but how many layers are there in the in the power hierarchy? If we're talking about the international system, we have superpowers or great powers, middle, and what are other layers?
You always had great powers, then middle powers, and then small powers. Or small states. Some of our colleagues write like a small states. When we're talking about regional powers, it's a bit different term, because it's actually more connected to geography in terms of some form of state which is enough influential to affect some regional affairs in their own respected regions. And in terms of superpowers, we don't have any superpower anymore, according to international theory, because
how is that?
Because it was erosion of power. We had USSR in their bloc, we had USA in their bloc, we had non-alignment movements in the world too.
Also, when it comes to middle powers, generally, I think we might think of countries like Canada or emerging middle powers like Brazil, India. And do you think Kazakhstan really stands on the same line as those countries?
Absolutely, yes.
Why? So I think this might be debatable, or at least it is like a common perception that certain countries have more economic power, they have more military power, and etc. compared to Kazakhstan.
Well, I think the overall problem is we cannot account all of this, any of these criteria, like how many soldiers we have to be middle power. Nobody will say the correct answer, or how many, I don't know, what GDP per capita should we have. In broader world, we always had some classic middle powers like Canada, United Kingdom, any member state of European Union, for example, Germany or France. We had always South Korea in the list. And then we have a term of rising middle powers from the global south. They're much different. For example, Saudi Arabia, much smaller than any of traditional middle power, but still have that asymmetric influence to international affairs. And saying honestly, of course, I understand that we are much different from both from classic middle powers and from rest of the rising middle powers in the global south. But the strength of Kazakhstan is not a military power. It's our strategic culture, I think. It's a thing which I'm currently working on, to understand how our national traditions, the mindsets of the nation affect to foreign policy perceptions, to foreign policy understanding, and how the nations see the world. We were never limited in terms of space. We always have a great steep as a core of our agenda. We always had a natural ability to balance ambitions of various players, both regional and out of regional players. For example, we always exist between Russia and China, maybe the only nation in the world whom statehood survived in these circumstances. We always had a very natural ability to work with different partners, because we are not over-focused on shared principle or values. We just cooperate, because that value-driven policies, even foreign policy, now have some natural crises in the world in terms of rise of populism left and right, rise of whole infodemics, when any statement by foreign policy experts might affect foreign policies of their countries. That's why I think the superpower of Kazakhstan is diplomacy. Yeah, of course, I would love to say that we have a cars, we have a culture. Of course, we have a culture. To the moment, not only South Korea demonstrates that being not Western or not European, not white, being colored person of color is great. To have your own language is also great. We are rising in terms of popular culture at this moment in the world, especially in Central Asia. You know that our movies and TV series are quite popular in the region. But indeed, to the moment, our strength is a foreign policy. It's our very natural ability to stabilize not only the region, but wider Eurasian space, and to bring different partners from all over the world to one place, and to make peace in a very natural way.
I just remembered, one of our recent interactions with you when I was taking a comment for my article from you, and you mentioned that being this middle powership, being diplomatic, it's just in our blood. And I think just our fate of our country, of Kazakhstan, to be positioned between great powers, it just didn't leave any other choice but to balance, because otherwise you are positioned Russia, China, all major players outside. We have India to the south. And if you want your future to be sustainable, if you want your future to be, you have to balance. And it's just a game, I think, that Kazakhstan has played and is playing very well so far. I totally agree that diplomacy is actually one of our biggest strengths so far.
And how do you think we can explain that the importance of diplomacy to common people? Because I think, and me being just a resident in Astana also, when we have big forums, when we have these things, you hear complaints about people about the traffic jam, or why do we spend so much money on certain
like
forums?
the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that
exactly.
caused so many traffic jams.
So I think when we talk to just common residents of Kazakhstan, they don't really see the benefits, or at least short-term benefits. Is there any short-term benefits, or is it more like a long-term strategy that will help to change this perception about Kazakhstan in the world?
For example, the summit of Shanghai Cooperation Organization you mentioned several times was quite historic for us, because it was a big international event, the very first one after we hosted OSCE summits, maybe 10 years or more. It was 2011
2010.
10.
Yeah.
So 14 years later, the biggest international events we hosted in 14 years. First, it's national pride. Second, it's very understandable, in my point of view, investment to your future, because coming back to that strategic culture, our ability to bring different partners to one place to speak about very serious things, especially in terms of security, is very important investment to our future, to the future of our generations. Because if you have predictable security system, if you have predictable security channels to talk with different partners, where you can solve, first of all, in very diplomatic way, to discuss the most critical issues of security. It is very important. It's much more cheaper than have great military abilities to protect yourself. And we see it in very different regions of the world, not only in Eurasia, but all over the world. In long term, it's also investment not only for the country image, but to strengthen our own voice. Because if we can unite so many partners, if we can bring them, so we can translate our own agenda in our own way, in our own words. Use very different partners to promote our agenda. For example, to the moment, President Tokayev is rapidly talking about international agency on biological security. At the same time, Kazakhstan just finished our membership or chairmanship in Human Rights Council within the United Nations. For 2 years, we were part of the council, and we actually succeed because several documents co-authored by Kazakhstan was widely supported by international community. This, in some form, invisible results are doing our life more predictable, are doing our life better. At the same time, if we will not be open to the world, people are always talking about that strength of passports. Like, how many countries I can visit without visas. Without very proactive foreign policy, without the policy of widely open doors for everyone, without bringing the world leaders to Kazakhstan and visiting them in their own countries, we will never be open enough to the world, and we will never achieve opportunity to visit some countries or regions without visas. It's also a result of huge work behind, or just of our, let's call it, touristic interests to visit many places like Bali or Thailand. So we are doing good in that term. And I think summits are very important. Yes, of course, it's always all about budget, and many people can think about it's just waste of money. But as for me, it is a strong investment to the future.
And I really like the word agency that you used, and I've read it several times when I was doing my articles, because agency is always what other nations, bigger nations, deprived the smaller nations of, because what I remember from my college years, we always talked about this great game, and it just focuses so much on what the great powers want and pursue and their interests. But it seemed to me like nobody asked the smaller nations, but there are so many smaller nations beyond great powers, And I really like this word agency, because I think it's our responsibility to build our future. It's in our hands, and the word agency is just resonates with me very much.
I also read in your book about this great powers paradox, I think it's called, where we have great powers or superpowers who can make the greatest impact into the status quo, but they're actually reluctant to change anything because it benefits them. So here comes the middle power, I think. And can you maybe make certain examples where middle powers as one country or as a group were able to make an impact and to change some status quo dominated by superpowers or great powers?
Well, I believe it's always about coalitions, because it's a very natural for middle powermanship or middle power strategy to form coalitions on certain questions. For example, Kazakhstan and France with one water summit in Saudi Arabia with so many participants. It's one small example. When we had a water issue as a core interest, and we created some form of coalition to discuss. In broader perspective, many middle powers actually affected policies by saying no sometimes within the United Nations. So to the moment, there is no great power who can just say that we're gonna do that and you're gonna all be agree. We see the very different position, and we see the huge agency of very different regions. For example, ASEAN is a group of small nations in terms of population, but at the same time they have that centrality in their policy concepts. They're always thinking about centralities, and the model how they created the trade system with the bigger regions is very interesting for us in Central Asia, because we have the same strategic importance in the heart of Eurasia, so we can say our own words in terms of Eurasian connectivity to the moment. There are cases when middle powers and middle power alliances were strong enough to promote agenda of cooperation, because it's also the subject of the book. It's different forms of multilateralism. So what is multilateralism for great powers, for middle powers and small states? It's very different. At the same time, the agency of middle powers actually creates a unique space of opportunities for small powers. Because without group or cohorts of middle powers in the world, the small powers is concrete that nations who was always obligated by great powers to do something, to act like something, or many things that President Trump is now advocating for in his recent tweets, as example. But coalition of middle powers was always providers of that form of international cooperation in the world, where we have enough power to say, no, we're not going to follow this, we are going to do like that.
All those words that you mentioned, I mean, multilateralism, the strategy that we were talking about just a bit earlier when talking about middle powers, it is all very much tied to this multi-vector foreign policy that Kazakhstan has pursued for years since it gained its independence in 1991 and maybe well before that. So my question is whether this multi-vector foreign policy, do you think it is a model for other nations, and how sustainable is that? Is it still realistic to pursue this foreign policy, to be friends with everybody when the only thing we see in the world is growing tensions, conflicts, and wars?
Well, the world is divided. It's very understandable. And it's highly likely that we are now on that historic point of time when the one world order is decreasing, and there is no any new norms, principles, and rules are formulated. There is no any in this period of time, and we cannot say how many years it's going to be like that. Our idea to back to basics, or to stay multi-vector in our foreign policy, is a very understandable strategy first. And second, many of our colleagues, especially who are from American academia or Chinese, Russian colleagues, they cannot understand what is that. What does it mean to be multi-vectoral? They see weakness in that. The lack of position, the lack of...
or neutrality, what they say usually,
So they see it as a weakness, but it is a very natural strength of our cultures. For example, over the past, it's already third, so over the past 2 years, we see how we really changed the regional processes in Central Asia. Mm-hmm. We understand that our strength is a unity. We clearly understand that we don't need any form of regional competition within the Central Asia. But now we understand the success of Kazakhstan is the success of Central Asia. The fail of Kazakhstan is the fail of Central Asia. And the same with all of the Central Asian states. We understand that we need to be neutral first, and second, we still can balance this uncertainty. Keeping multi-vectoral approach into foreign policy means ability to balance the regions, to balance the situation. We are not making a friendship or partnerships against someone. Yes. we're always talking about bilateral track or multilateral track if we're talking about cooperation within some regional organizations or international ones. So I think the future of multilateralism, especially for Kazakhstan and Central Asia, it is quite strategic choice of these nations to be like that. But at the same time, multilateral foreign policy might not be working for other regions in the world because of their history, because of their culture, because of the strategic culture at the same time. And very unique context of each region in the world.
If we compare it to human relations, let's say a person, how can a person be friends with everybody but still pursue its own interests? It's what Kazakhstan usually says, like we have no contradictions, but in all our relations with other countries, we always protect our national interests.
If we will balance this model to human relations, it means that you're going to have constructive relations. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to, get married to someone. Okay. It means that you are still positive guy who keep smiling, handshaking, working with someone. It's like having business relations,
things, right?
Like we are colleagues. So,
yeah.
We don't have to be, best friends forever, but we still can work on something together. We are not friends with the whole world, but we are very open for that form of relations. Well, the very bright case in this theory is actually all of a sudden Kazakhstan have a whole African policy emerging right now.
And it's foreign policy, you mean?
Yes, yes. Over the last year, so last year we hosted 2 African leaders within Kazakhstan. We have our special representative to the African Union. It's a very interesting continent, why not? So we have our own interest in Africa. We are interested in African markets. We understand that the goods we export to the world are actually quite interesting to the African markets. It is a rising and huge market. The only continent in the world where they have African Union of 55 member states out of 55 states located in the African continent. So all of them are members of one union. They have quite inspiring model of regional trade and regional trade agreements. So we just need to find some focal points to enter the market. And it's actually what we are doing right now. Of course, for wider audience, it can be confusing, like why African leaders are visiting Kazakhstan. Where is Africa? Where is Kazakhstan?
Yes, what can we offer them and what they are offering us?
But we have much more things in common. We have strong business interests in Africa. We have some positive things which we can bring from Africa. I mean, in terms of to bring some new products to our local markets. At the same time, it's quite understandable that our like-minded policy, foreign policy, is a key to promote our initiatives in the global arena. For example, within the United Nations, when we will have plus 55 voices to our resolutions, to our initiatives. So it is a strategic game to the future. So even Africa can bring something. And I can understand the overall perception that we need, the most developed countries in the world coming to Kazakhstan. But to do that, we still have to make some homework. And we have a foreign policy not to have it as it is. We have a foreign policy to achieve our national goals, to balance the region, to balance international arena, to create a special space for opportunities for Kazakhstan in various regions, in various jurisdictions, to bring investments, to guarantee that investments will be safe, and our own jurisdiction is doing actually quite good in terms of bringing investment and securing them within the country. We have to make sure that the world is friendly enough for our citizens. Our big achievements, we don't have friendly and unfriendly countries to Kazakhstan.
And that's actually one of the questions that I was going to ask you. How does this multi-vector foreign policy impact Kazakhstan's own domestic priorities, whether it is economic diversification or any other priority areas?
Well, we have our own deep agenda with any of our foreign partner. For example, we're working with the Netherlands in terms of investment. We're working with US, Italy, Spain, many European countries like France and Germany, who actually also visited Kazakhstan last year, in terms of bringing new technologies to Kazakhstan. We succeeded in a special way with France. I have to say that our Casbio farm is going to produce some veterinarian vaccines. Quite important achievement for Kazakhstan, because in this term we can, first of all, it's quite unique model for one of the biggest farm companies in the world to provide their own formulas and to provide this opportunity to produce it in Kazakhstan. So we're going to have the most effective vaccines in terms of some disease with cows and the rest of the animals, which will be made in Kazakhstan. And we already started the production last year. And we can export it to Central Asia and to different regions in the world. So we have understandable tasks to double our economy by 2029. It means that we need to attract a lot of investment. It means that we need to find the new drivers of our economic development. At the same time, we, as a nation, need to follow the global trends. What I really want to say is that foreign policy is always number two, because foreign policy really depends from national interests, really depends from domestic policy, our own national priorities and goals we formulate for ourselves. Because, for example, if you need investment, it means foreign policy model like this. If you need, military cooperation, military security, weapons or something like that, you have completely different model of foreign policy. If you need to facilitate a trade with the world, you have a third model. So the model is always depends from the national tasks and goals we formulate for each other.
I think that's quite true, because we should be a priority for ourselves, and if we don't think about our national interests, nobody would think of them. I mean, that's definitely a point to make. But can I just quickly return to the topic of neutrality, because I really like what you said, that neutrality is the strength actually, and not the weakness like other countries or people may look at it. What are the risks and rewards of maintaining this neutrality in the coming decades or in the coming future?
It's not easy to understand how a world is going to transform in coming decades, because so many factors affecting the real world as of now, as example. Who knows, maybe now we have, to the moment we have the most fragile world and world system, world order, than in any point of history to the moment. And nuclear threats are also quite high to the moment. And you know that Kazakhstan was always used its own agency to stabilize the question of nuclear power in international affairs. It was one of the pillars of our foreign policy, one of the strong and stable points in our own agenda. And to the moment, the world is changing in not positive way. I mean, we have a fragmentation, we have a confrontation. What is also very important, we have economic confrontation, and it's clearly understandable that if you read Kazakhstan 2050, in its preface, it was written how Kazakhstan sees the world by 2050. That we're gonna have open markets, free trade, and so many good liberal things we really predicted gonna have by 2050. But to the moment, we have a crisis of international organizations, crisis of international trade, rise of trade wars, sanctions, weaponization of sanctions as a tool in international relations. Still, we have problem of let's call it deviant states and rise of conflicts all over the world, so close to our borders. So it's not easy to say that having position in every single international affairs question is needed.
Okay.
We don't have to, make an official statement regarding every single question in the world. In our own way, in our own term, of course, as a nation within the system, we need to have a very clear understanding of what is going on in the world, but align or not to align is a strategic choice of the country. We actually mastered it over the past decades, and I believe that this ability of our country to not ally in many fields and to find our own words and terms, to continue to work with different partners, of course in deep understanding of global context and respecting international norms and sanctions too. We still have too many things to do in the world as a nation. We have our own agenda, so we don't have to follow the agenda of rest of the regions.
That pretty much answers my question
Yeah.
about neutrality.
We act taking into account our own national interests, right? Well, I wanna, for a minute, let's drop politics. And I wanna talk about the role of what Kazakhstan or Kazakhs say about themselves. And here comes the role of public intellectuals. So as a journalist, when I read foreign media, I feel like there is still a certain information gap about Kazakhstan. What I mean by that is that there is certain perception of foreign media, for example, about Kazakhstan. Still, many people perceive it as post-Soviet, one of the Stan countries, etc., etc. And I feel like currently our people in culture, in history, they're bringing their own perspective about Kazakhstan. So things that Kazakhs say about themselves, not what others say about us, right? This can be reflected in our archaeologists going to different libraries, doing research, reshaping certain facts about our history, etc., etc. And my question here comes to the role of scholars, researchers, and particularly in international relations, in politics, because I think here we also have those information gaps where the majority of information probably was influenced or written by Western scholars or people from who do not live in Kazakhstan, let's say that. So do you think there are certain themes that researchers can fill in about Kazakhstan, researchers from Kazakhstan, our public intellectuals?
Well, absolutely. I think we did quite good for many decades as a nation, as a country, in terms of engaging with the world, but at the same time, that intellectual space is a dimension of international affairs where Kazakhstan was never presented or underrepresented. If we're talking about clearly academic researchers in the world, the problem is always about inside and outside researchers. So we have insiders who are mostly writing in Russian or Kazakh, so they cannot write in English. And what is even more important, they're writing for completely different journals. So it's a very parallel worlds which never connecting.
So they're writing for different audiences.
They're writing for different audiences. They're writing for different academic journals. And two of these camps are never reading each other. Even if I spent most of my career as a think tank researcher, I'm still active academic. I wrote my academic book. It's not a practical book. It's not a novel or something like that. I'm writing academic articles, and sometimes I'm asked to review some articles in very reputable journals. And the problem is very clear as for me. Kazakhstan, for many decades, lived in the world of outside researchers, in the narratives about Kazakhstan, which was created outside of the country. The problem in terms of academics community is very clear, especially in the Western academy. Most of the colleagues who are now writing about Central Asia are actually Sovietologists. So by their education, by their background.
And they are foreigners.
Yes, they are foreigners. For example, we have Professor Alexander Cooley, who is now vice provost at Bernard College of Columbia University, one of the biggest names in Central Asian studies. We have Professor Rico Isaacs in the UK, who is actually #1 academic specialist in party politics of Kazakhstan.
Interesting.
Surprise. Professor Cooley wrote a book, I think, with Professor John Heathershaw from the UK, with the title "Dictators Without Borders." So it was his let's call it their understanding of their own lines on how they see the region, with a very Russian lines, because Harriman Institute was created as a Russia Institute during the Cold War. So they studied Soviet Union very very, very well for many, many, many decades. And now they implementing, not correct lines to understand the real process within the region. But the problem is we need to, we had Ebola shock for many decades. We have many colleagues with doctoral degrees, professorships, but still we don't have that critical mass of public intellectuals or people who can write on international level and to present our own country on international level.
So is it the problem of a language barrier that you mentioned at the beginning, that there is certain scholars who write in Kazakh or Russian language supposedly for local audiences, and there is another group of scientists who write in English, which has much wider audience. So is there not enough scholars now who can translate their internal politics of Kazakhstan in English language? Or
I think it is also about you mentioned public intellectuals should write more, but it is also about the access to those influential journals where those publications should be published. Because what I've heard from my friends and acquaintances, that getting your piece into an internationally accredited journal, magazine, is quite a challenging task.
In terms of academic publishing, you need a lot of time and expertise, because it's always double-blind peer-reviewed. Yeah. So your reviewer don't know who you are, you don't know who your reviewer is. So it's two-sided neutrality process when nobody have any perception of the second side, only the text. It takes a lot of time to publish in academic journals. But in wider context, we have not only academic journals, but more professional journals and media outlets like the Astana Times as a brilliant sample. Very interesting fact that for many really academic articles I'm reading in the top journals, the Astana Times is a source of information. It's academic source, so the official link that Astana Times, something like that.
Even I didn't know that.
But when you read these articles, I mean fully academic articles, it's not op-ed published online. It's academic articles in top journals. You see the Astana Times as a source, because it's always question of the sources in terms of academic writing. When we're talking about op-eds, it's also very important. For example, at Mind, we decided that our public analytical products will be op-eds. I believe that Kazakh foreign policy is the broadest field possible, because we have too many partners with too many different arguments on having that partnership. But it's also a task for us. It's our professional responsibility to bring not only the world to Kazakhstan, but to bring Kazakhstan to the world.
Yeah. That's actually our motto of the Astana Times, bringing Kazakhstan to the world.
It is a very difficult task, because we have too many illusions around Kazakhstan as one of the stands overall about the region of Central Asia. We have many propaganda concepts from the third parties about us. We have Borat as example, very beautiful sample of brilliant misunderstanding of the country and brilliant misunderstanding of what is diplomacy really is. Because, in my field, we clearly understand that even during the domestic podcasts or interviews, every single word is weapon. So in this divided world, in this world full of conflicts, every single professional should think twice what he's talking about. But we have to the moment what we have, and the task is clear. We need to write more to the top outlets. I think Astana Times doing brilliant job in bringing Kazakhstan to the world in your own way. But for rest of the contributors, for your respected platform, the task should be even more clear. We have to come to the best universities, the best think tanks, best places all over the world. But now we need to bring different concepts from Kazakhstan on how we see the world. Because, for example, we have Greater Eurasia or Russian pivot to the east, America first. So it is a very different concept. It's foreign policy concepts too, on how different nations see the world. And to the moment, I believe that middle powermanship from Kazakhstan is also why it was successful all over the world. Because for the first time, Kazakhstan formulated its own concept, found its own voice, found its own place, described its own strategic culture on how we see the world. Now we're working on joint events with our Spanish colleagues. We're also going to meet leading universities and think tanks in Italy very soon. We're working with Thailand, South Korea, South Africa, the US and the UK. So as of my program, which I'm heading now, the world is open for Kazakhstan, and we see it as a very important window of opportunities. We understand it is only a window, so we need to take a chance and to do everything correctly, to promote Kazakhstan in our own way, in our own beautiful way, because for many thinkers in the world, we are still not understandable in terms of our strategic culture, in terms of our perceptions on different things.
In that window of opportunity that you mentioned, what's the take for multilateralism? I mean, we mentioned all the fragility of the international system, the dividing, the conflicting nations, and all of this stuff. But what's the hope and what's the take for multilateralism? Can we hope for that? Because I know Kazakhstan has been, and I think will be, a strong advocate for multilateralism.
The best thing is that we still keep talking, because fragile world and so on and so forth is a result of the more important trend, is the crisis of trust in the international affairs. When we stop talking, public intellectuals, diplomats, thinkers, scholars, we have more and more serious questions which we are already not ready to answer. But while we're talking, we can find a common ground. So I think Kazakhstan will continue to support and advocate multilateralism in a very natural way by bringing different partners to the table, by using extraterritorial approach. For example, working with ASEAN, Africa, Latin America, Europe, the whole world is open for Kazakhstan. We can formulate the very interesting narratives for Kazakhstan.
Totally agree with that point. And I think that pretty much answers all the questions that we had for today. Before we wrap up our conversation, we have our little traditions on the podcast, inspired by one of our favorite podcasts. We'd love for you to come up with one question, whether it is fun, deep, or challenging, that we're gonna ask our next guest. We don't know yet who that will be, but we'll credit the question to you. So just any question that you want the other expert to reflect on, and we're gonna credit that
what
next.
What is the topic?
Episode. Any topic. Anything that comes up. Very quick, brief,
Yeah, it
and
can
fun.
be something broad, it can be something even personal.
Well, personal, broad. It's always good to know the person who's gonna be next.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
In that,
those
in that
limits.
form, I can formulate the question specific for him or her. Well, let's ask about his or her or truth or wherever Kazakhstan is middle power or not.
Okay.
Interesting.
We'll keep that question in mind, and we'll definitely credit that to you in our next episode of the podcast.
Thank you, and I will come back on the third episode to say something, to comment our
Yeah.
colleague. It's a joke, but
We'll be waiting for you. And one more thing to say is also we have a little present for you, you being our first guest, and we are really grateful that we had this conversation. And it's Astana Times branded t-shirt.
oh, thank you.
So
I saw you had a competition on your social media to win it,
Yeah, we had.
yes.
and I'm very happy that
We
I
have
succeed.
extra.
This is a special gift just for you. We are honored to have you tonight with us, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us tonight.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't too boring, and because
It was insightful. Yeah.
well, saying honestly, we have 20 million specialists in foreign policy in Kazakhstan, especially when I came to the taxis, and all of them commenting what they saw on the TV with me. Like, you say something like that. You are correct, it's okay, but it was always funny. So thank you very much. I will put this t-shirt with me to my office, and thank you for the Astana Times for this opportunity to come.
It was a pleasure to talk to you.
It was my pleasure.
You can actually open it if you like and see.
Yeah. Or you can open it in private.
Yeah.
whatever fits you.
You know, it's also result of different cultures, because in Western term, you need to open it and to show your satisfaction. But in Asian context, if you will open the present the same time you get it, it's a very rude manner. So in this form, I'm always balanced, so I'm not.
You can open it just a little bit, right?
Yeah, we're
Yeah, I
in
can.
the middle.
I can do
So-
it middle. So it's a beautiful white. No drama llama. Okay, thank you very much. I think it's very. Oh yeah, it's Astana Times, bringing Kazakhstan to the world. Very inspiring motto, and best of luck in your mission.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you very much.